Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our regular council meeting for November 25th, 2024, starting at 7 p.m. I do, just before we do call to order officially, want to welcome our local cadet squadron 822. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. I had a great opportunity to speak with some young, bright minds about local government, and they did want to see the gavel in action, and they might not make it to the end of the meeting. So I'm going to use the gavel to call our meeting to order, although that's not my normal process. There we go. Now with that, may I have a mover and seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Dunstall, seconded by Councillor Cressman. All those in favour in our meeting starting, and that is carried unanimously. I will turn it over to Councillor Wilkinson for our land acknowledgement.
We have gathered in Wilmot Township on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Mississauga peoples. We also want to acknowledge the importance of the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a peace agreement made between Indigenous nations before the Europeans arrived. It characterizes our collective responsibility to each other and Mother Earth. We should take only what we need, leave enough for others, and keep the dish clean. By acknowledging this covenant in the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people, we are reminded of our important connection to this land where we live, learn, and work together as a community.
Thank you, Councillor. We do have additions to the agenda, and it's item 7.2. We have two specific interest delegations that have been added. One is speaking on council staff relations policy, and the other is speaking on the notice of motion regarding the working group for the Prime Minister's path. We do also have added correspondence for this evening. And if I could have a mover for the agenda as presented. Moved by Councillor Wilkinson, seconded by Councillor Dunstall. All those in favour? And that carries unanimously. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest, councillors? Seeing none, we have our minutes from the November 4th regular council meeting. The recommendation is that they be adopted as presented. May I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Dunstall, seconded by Councillor Sadhu. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favour? That carries unanimously. As for delegations, as I mentioned, we do have some this evening. We have both general and specific interest delegations who have registered to address council this evening. Each speaker will have 7 minutes to address council. I would like to remind all delegations of some guidelines for participation. For those who are joining us in person, please proceed to the podium when you are called upon to speak. Delegations will have 7 minutes to speak. If you conduct yourself in any of the following manners, it will result in immediate removal from the meeting, including interrupting councillors, staff, or other delegations, derogatory statements about councillors, staff, or others, turning your camera on at inappropriate times, and hate speech or defamatory comments. One last reminder for delegations, please do not take offense if following your presentation, there are no questions from council. This is council's time to really listen and reflect upon the opinions and ideas shared with us from our community members. Although it is rare, I'd like to remind delegates and members of the public that failure to adhere to appropriate decorum may result in your microphone being muted and/or removal from the meeting. Out of respect for all meeting participants, I kindly ask that those in the gallery remain seated unless exiting the chambers and avoid personal conversations and expressions of support or opposition to those speaking in order to allow everyone to hear the proceedings as they occur. So we do have one general interest delegation, and as a reminder to council, after hearing the general interest delegation, council can receive the delegation for information only referring to the matter or refer the matter to staff for additional information. Matters addressed during the general interest delegation are not to be debated, and only questions of clarification are permitted. With that, I will now invite this evening's general interest delegation, Katie Honig, to address council. Katie, thank you for joining us, and you will have 7 minutes.
Can everybody hear me? Awesome. Good evening, citizens and councillors and mayor. My name is Katie Honig, and I call New Hamburg my home, which is part of the Between the Lakes Treaty 3 of 1792. I'm a white settler hailing from Poland and Ukraine on my father's side and Germany and Scotland on my mother's. I'm here to speak to you today about the imperative of putting words into action. Since 2019, the Wilmot Council has read a land acknowledgement at the beginning of every council meeting. This is a small ongoing effort made for reconciliation and to address harms both historical and ongoing. Land acknowledgement calls attention to the relationship between settlers and Indigenous peoples, and all peoples' responsibility to safeguard and steward the territories we occupy. In the statement, you indicate the importance of the dish with one spoon agreement, saying it is our collective responsibility to each other and Mother Earth. We should only take what we need, leave enough for others, and keep the dish clean. This is a call to action, not a passive sentiment. It calls for considerate decision-making, conscientious action, and commitment to sustainable management of our township for future generations. When our land acknowledgement becomes just a statement that is then set aside to get on with the meeting proper, it echoes a hollow and purely performative leadership, with a disregard for the territory you were asked to steward or for the future of the community you were tasked to cultivate. Reconciliation, oh yeah, we addressed that. Those are just words, and now we can move on with the crucial part, without the crucial part, action. Since March, you've been hearing from citizens who put into action all our responsibility for caring for the land we occupy, ensuring crops will grow to sustain us for generations, and who are now being pushed aside without consideration, conversation, or transparency. Our farmers affected by the proposed land assembly cultivate the land to feed our community, and they need our support. They need your support. I want to be represented by a council that answers the call to action. I want to live in a community that is committed to truth and reconciliation, in words and in action, providing environmental protection for this territory. Apathy on your part is a demonstrable threat to our community, our farmers, their livelihood, and future generations who want to make a home and thrive here. I'm extremely concerned by your inaction to undertake environmental surveys or impact analysis, or to consult the Grand River Conservation Authority. A community committed to truth and reconciliation absolutely cannot move forward with plans like these that will harm the land, the waters, and the future. We uphold the ideals of the dish with one spoon wampum, our collective responsibility to each other and Mother Earth. We should take only what we need, leave enough for others, and keep the dish clean. I call you, the Wilmot Council, to act with the conviction of our land acknowledgement offered at the outset of every meeting. You must build back trust with this township. Words are only meaningful when put into practice. Declare loudly that Wilmot is an unwilling host. Demand that environmental water impact surveys are done, and hold everyone accountable to follow through on those results. Those pushing this land assembly through are finding ways to avoid the information about it surfacing. Bring this information to light. Do not let it remain hidden. Create as much openness and transparency so the community can properly be consulted. Your hands are not tied. You must uphold your commitment to the land, the waters, and the future of our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katie. Are there any questions for our delegation? Seeing none, the only thing I would just say, Katie, is, and I know that I've said it to other delegates who have come up on this topic, I would really appreciate it if you did come to the region of Waterloo, as this is a region of Waterloo land assembly that's happening in Wilmot. So I would certainly suggest that your words would hopefully resonate with some of my colleagues at the table around there, and I think it's very important for them to hear your message. So thank you for joining us here this evening, and I do hope to see you at the region in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Yes, Councillor Cressman.
We were instructed to have no response or in terms of a speech or whatever. Does that constitute what you did?
Thank you, Councillor. That is noted, and I will, yes, remind everyone in the gallery, please do remain quiet so that proceedings can go on as they are to, which does include not having noise coming from the gallery. Again, that would include noise from the gallery. If we can please have people refrain from the gallery from speaking, thank you. As I mentioned, we do also have specific interest delegations regarding items on the agenda for this evening. When we get to those items, I will call upon the delegates to speak at the appropriate time. For correspondence, did anybody want to pull out any items? Seeing none, we do have consent agenda items. Would anybody like to remove any of the items? Councillor Cressman?
Yes, I would like to do the drainage. Not that I think there's a lot of question on that, but just wanted to ask.
Yes, 9.2, please go ahead.
Are we aware of how far along that drainage report is for the, I guess it would be going to.
Sorry, I'm looking over to our CLT and it's our clerk over here, Clerk Boss.
Thank you, Mayor Salonen. So the engineer report is still in the preliminary stages where they are still holding on-site meetings with landowners. So this will not delay the process any.
Any additional questions on item 9.2? Seeing none and nobody wants to pull any other items? All right. Then with that, I will call a vote, or I guess, sorry, I need a mover and a seconder to vote on both 9.1 and 9.2. Moved by Councillor Sadhu, seconded by Councillor Cressman. All those in favor, and that carries unanimously. On to our reports. Our first one is the recommendation is that report COR-2024-56, Council Staff Relation Policy, be reviewed for information, and that Council Staff Relations Policy included as Attachment 1 be approved effective January 1st, 2025. To get this on the floor, may I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Dunstall, seconded by Councillor Martin. And I will invite our acting CAO, oh my goodness, sorry, there are a lot of words on here. Our acting Chief Administrative Officer and Director of Corporate Services and CFO, Greg Clark, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this is the same policy that we brought to you about 3 weeks ago. We've made a couple of one minor adjustment and provided some additional feedback to council as requested. So we identified specifically the policies that were referenced in putting this policy together, and that's in the body of the report. And in terms of the reporting mechanism, if there is a complaint, we did confirm with our Integrity Commissioner that the process as identified there is correct, and that is the way that we would proceed if a complaint came against the CAO, that we would take it to the Integrity Commissioner, and they asked us to add the reference to the section in the Municipal Act that outlines their role, as that then clearly stipulates that they're going to do their job as laid out in the Municipal Act, and that sort of supersedes anything that's in here based on a complaint against either a member of council or the CAO. Other than that, the report is the same as basically we presented 3 weeks ago.
Thank you. Councillors, do you have any questions or comments? We do have a registered delegation, so debate will be after. This is for questions of clarity. Okay. Seeing none at this time, I will now invite our delegation up, Mr. Barry Wolf, to address council. Barry, thank you for joining us, and you will have 7 minutes to speak.
On July 5th, 2021, after the previous council had perfunctorily heard delegations from both the Prime Minister's Path Project's future and then immediately ignored the input of 80% of that citizen input and had the hubris to read from prepared scripts to rationalize their actions, I asked myself the question, how did it come to this? How does this corporation make decisions?
Sorry, Barry, I just want clarification. The one that we're talking about right now is this council staff relations. I know you're talking about PMP later. I just want to make sure you have the right notes in front of you. Okay.
Do I get my time back?
I will give you your time back as chair. I just wanted to clarify that we were on the right topic.
Before we move the time, in typical Barry Wolf fashion, there is context to understanding. Thank you. I reviewed council meeting minutes and reports dating back to 2016 when the township signed a contract with CreateScape. I asked for the documents produced by the township to fulfill its requirement to provide an educational program acceptable to the public. Request denied. I wondered how the organization was structured, who was responsible for what, who reported to whom, what are the structural checks and balances for accountability. Thus, I requested the consultant's report of recommendations for Wilmot's organizational structure review and people plan. Request denied. Staff presented a report recently advising us of the need to spend $1 million to renovate this castle to add exactly 11 more employees. I asked my councillor for a copy of the report. My second attempt, he said he had to ask permission. He had to ask permission to provide me with the information, which would be the logical rationale for adding exactly 11 more employees and for telling citizens why they needed to contribute another $1 million. Report denied. Council doesn't have the information being presently used by management to hire staff, potentially, and renovate capital assets at public expense. There's a pattern here. A lot of talk over time by senior management about transparency, timely, respectful, inclusive communication with our stakeholders, consistent, collaborative community participation, public engagement, public affirmation of our marching orders, trust building, but no follow-through. Whoever controls information controls knowledge. Whoever controls knowledge controls power. After 3 years of trying to get the answer to my question, how did it come to this, I've reached some conclusions about who controls the information, thus who controls the knowledge, and thus who controls the power in decision-making in this corporation. The facts say that Council does not have all the information required for it to fill its legislative requirement to provide supervision of the CAO role and to ensure the accountability and transparency of the operations of the municipality. That is on one senior manager over many years. It's an inappropriate management culture arising over time and still is evident. That's also on councils. Councils have sat passively by, allowing this upending of the hierarchy of authority in the OMA by allowing this power shift to develop. Councils over time have been told what their role is, where they sit in the pecking order by management, instead of council directing and supervising staff, such that management was kept in line behind council's leadership. It's an inappropriate culture, upending the authorities in the process of decision-making. This proposed policy intends to codify that inappropriate culture of management acting way out in front of its skis is common practice. It's an attempt to legitimize the practice of overreaching its authority as regulated in the OMA in a bylaw.
Barry, I'm just going to remind you,
Why?
This is based off of professional opinion from staff and collective of others. Please just be careful on your wording as you're making accusations.
Pause.
Yes, the time was paused.
I'm a citizen. I'm allowed to have opinions. And
Absolutely.
Opinions are based on the observation of documentable facts.
Absolutely. I'm just giving a reminder.
My rationale, why defeat it? Number one, this proposed policy written by management is superfluous. It's not needed. Everything one needs to know is already in the OMA. Council just has to assert its authority in practice as it is his duty. That's best practice. Secondly, this proposed policy is in contradiction of the constructive and instructive findings recorded in the corporate communications strategy produced by Red Book Consultants. I've provided a handout to each of you, and I've listed the references to the communication policy that it contravenes in this policy. The intent and the policy are in contradiction. The corporation structure has the role of the CAO, whomever that might be, as the funnel through which all information flows up to council and down to staff. The CEO role has morphed from a funnel to a filter, and at times has become a cork. Information is filtered in that only the approved, after consultation and approval from a boss, may sanitized information flow. If this proposal is approved, it would give the role of the CEO the authority to also control the flow outward from the corporation to the public. The mayor would no longer be the spokesperson for the corporation. In practice, it would be the CEO's name and face that would be in local newspapers, and the mayor may or may not be mentioned in passing as a sixth paragraph down as an insert. It would become the role of a CAO, which has the power. Anyone now and on into the future who sits in that chair would wield that authority almost omnipotently. What do we do? Number one, recognize that citizens have high regard for most service levels in Wilmot. Fire protection, parks, recreation, public facilities, most roads, for example. No problem with the directors and all the staff performance of their duties. Number two, defeat this policy proposal because it's not needed. It's superfluous. In fact, because it's in contradiction of the corporate communication strategy's references, I suggest it's an example of unacceptable practice when weighed against the benchmark standards described in the Red Book report. What this community needs, these are my recommendations, is Council to direct that Brett O'Reilly participate in meetings and be seated at this Council at the end near the press box. B, for Council to direct that all management reports be first vetted through the Office of the Communications Specialist, as it is she who will provide the check and balances within the corporation from a tactical and strategic perspective, ensuring that no longer will any reports be written by, reviewed by, presented by one individual. C, for Council to direct that all senior management roles participate in a professional development training regarding best practice communications, a development of a checklist of best practice against which all communications can be evaluated, and the same for Council. I'm recommending that Council produce its own Council meeting agendas of items compliant with an efficient and effective planning calendar which will address the interests of the citizens. Recognize that the CAO supervises all hired staff and must be aware of all activities, all service areas as they are executed every day, every month, and be able to provide direction or redirection as needed to their hired staff. He or she or they must have a comprehensive knowledge of what has happened, what is happening, and what will be happening in the known future. Council needs to have that exact same data. They need to create their own calendar so they have a knowledge of what's coming up in the year. They can predict, they can plan, and they can anticipate and request or direct that staff provide all of those things so they are ready and prepared. None of this 10 days in advance stuff. You should be getting information a year or more in advance because you know it's a regular repetition. Council needs to hire an additional dedicated communication staff now. The personnel would have responsibilities. I'm really close.
Please wrap it up.
Have responsibilities that include making the website user-friendly and Google search engine compatible. No more, we need to better, acknowledged, we need to do better, starting later. Maybe. For all members of this corporation, they need to recognize that the smartest people are not necessarily in the council chamber room, but are also on the other side of that barrier behind me in the community, all 22,000 plus of them, because together we are better, not under the leadership of one person only. The CEO is an administrator, not a leader.
Thank you very much, Barry. Councillors, are there any questions for our delegate? Seeing none, thank you, Barry, for joining us. I believe we'll see you back here for another item later on this evening.
And it'll be a much more friendly one.
Councillors, I will open it up for general debate, questions or comments, if anybody has any on this item. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Through the chair. In reading this, I mean, there's quite a bit of analysis and some pieces here where, you know, I think we could debate and potentially make changes, but ultimately I think I came to the conclusion when reading it, it really suggests what is a relationship between council and staff and how that relates to mayor and CAO as well. I'm looking at this and I'm thinking perhaps given what the substance of this is and what it's suggesting, are we potentially better served by reviewing this policy when we have a non-interim or acting CAO, but rather a CAO that's been hired, and receive the input and perspective from that end before we go forward and make this decision. I think there's a lot of good in here, but I think at the same time there's some other pieces that potentially need change, but I would be curious to see what that perspective would be when we have someone that we've selected or can rely upon from that perspective. So with that, I actually would put forward a motion to defer until that time.
So to clarify, if it's a deferral, the time, I'm just looking at our clerk for specifying the timing. So you're saying the time in which we have a permanent CAO?
Yes, can we tie it to
Okay.
that?
Just give me a moment to double check with the clerk. Yep, so the clerk is saying time would be tied to that. So with that motion, is there a seconder to defer? Seconded by Councillor Sadhu. So at this point, the only debate would be about the deferral, and then we'd vote on the deferral. Councillor Cressman.
Yes, I would speak against deferring it. I think we're in a situation that this was proposed as early as July.
Sorry, Councillor, I may have misled you. The clerk has just reminded me, it's only time and place that we're allowed to debate on a deferral. That's my apologies for my wording, but that is what the clerk has advised me. So if you're not in favor, then just vote against. If you have a comment
Okay,
about
I think I
time
can
or
comment
place.
on the aspect of not, I'm against this motion. I guess I find I'm handicapped in ability to speak.
Councillor Martin.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, can I ask a question about the reason that we can only debate time and place?
I will defer to the clerk on that one.
Thank you. So the motion to postpone or defer to a certain time, written in our procedural bylaw as well as Robert's Rules of Order, is only debatable for the time and place you are deferring it to. You can amend the time and place you defer it to, but you cannot debate the matter.
Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. So does that mean that we can debate it once this motion is decided on? For time
I'll
and place?
go back to Clerk Boss.
Thank you. Through the mayor. Once you have voted on this motion that's on the floor, the secondary motion to defer, the original motion is back on the floor, so you can debate the policy, and another motion could come on the floor at that point as well. But the motion that is on the floor is to defer. Yeah, sorry. If it was to be defeated, then it goes back to the main motion. If it gets deferred, we will take this off the table when there is a permanent CAO.
Any other questions on time or place then? Okay, seeing none, so all those in favor of deferring to when we have a permanent CAO in place? And all those opposed? And that's defeated. So now we go back to debating the main motion that is before us. Did anybody have comments on that? Councillor Cressman, were you reaching to? It's okay if not. I just saw three of you move for your microphone.
Well, yes, through you, Mayor. It is my impression, yes, this isn't perfect. I was surprised. I didn't know how to balance the idea that the mayor speaks for the corporation as compared to the mayor speaking on behalf of council for the corporation. So that's what I would see as something I would like to change, because otherwise it gives the implication that whatever the mayor thinks is what, I'm not attacking you personally, but I'm looking at this as saying the ground rules are that council, it's the council's decisions that are put forward to the 22,000 or whatever. And I think the challenge that we have in this is, yes, the CAO represents the corporation to the broader public. So yes, there's part of it. The thing that's frustrating me is that I think I've heard that this was in the works since this past July, and we haven't seen it. It has been needed. There's actions that have happened in this township that would have been helped with this, and so I think we have to get something in place expeditiously.
So, Councillor, were you looking to actually change wording then in, was it an amendment that you wanted to make, or were you just making a general comment? Okay, I will let you sit and think on that. Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. And this may be for acting CAO or clerk boss. It's my understanding that there are very clear guidelines between what is the responsibility of the corporation and what is the responsibility of council. Is that the case? According to the Municipal Act, there are things that township does, that's your responsibility, and things that council do, and those are our responsibility. And together, we move forward and try to make improvements or move our township forward. But those lines are very clear. Is that correct?
Through you, Madam Mayor, that is accurate. That is actually very accurate. The Municipal Act in Section 270, bracket 1 says that the municipality must have a policy that documents the relationship between members of council and the officers, employees of the municipality. And so that's what this document is. So this document is based on best practice from a number of municipalities. Our Integrity Commissioner also reviewed it and gave their blessing that they feel it is a good document. At the end of the day, I leave it to council to give direction.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilkinson?
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, I think maybe just to build on what Councillor Dunstall was saying there, I mean, in truth, we actually have this policy. It already does exist. This is just a revisiting of it or a refinement of it, right? So I don't necessarily think that this has to be the case. We do have a policy. I think where I take issue, I've got a number of items here highlighted. There's a few things. I start right at the top when we're looking at definitions, and I see item 3.4 is defining what a routine matter is, and item 3.5 saying a non-routine matter. And then it goes further to suggest that councillors are essentially just members of the public, and that's the extent of the information that we're entitled to. But I would make the argument that we actually get more information, and I think it should remain that way. I mean, we've been entrusted by the public to represent them. That's why we're here. Our job is to direct policy, administer, or adjudicate tax dollars, and make sure that we're giving proper direction based on what our public are looking for and the people that we represent. My concern would be is that if we define things as being a routine or non-routine matter, who makes that call? It suggests that the Integrity Commissioner could make that call, but in knowing how sometimes the Integrity Commissioner moves, that could essentially delay things beyond reason to actually accomplish our business or get answers for things that we need. That's one item. I would also say that there's
Sorry,
a number
Councillor, I just want to clarify. Are you making amendments that we should be noting, like that the clerk should be noting at this time to what you're doing, or are
I
you
think
just making general comment?
at this point, through the chair, I'm speaking or making my case to defeat this. In terms of amendments, I certainly feel like we could sit here and make some. I've got a bunch of items that I'm not sure should be in here. And I mean, if we're open to that, I'm happy to.
That's fine. I'm just looking for direction to know if
Perhaps I'm not there yet. I maybe want to have the
Okay.
conversation and debate.
That's fine.
And then get there. I mean,
Please continue then.
for example, if we look at number 7 where it sets out policy, I think where we're setting here is that this is almost superseding what's defined in the Ontario Municipal Act, where it's saying that it's expected that members of council will, and that's the key word, will, request corporate leadership team prior to making policy decisions, discuss issues and questions prior to showing up to debate. I mean, sometimes those things just can't be the case. So to be beholden to these, we run into trouble. Also, consult with the appropriate director prior to responding to constituents' concerns or requests to ensure accurate information regarding township policies, service levels, budgets, and work plans. I mean, if I have to go and consult with the director every time I get a question from a constituent, I'm essentially, by agreeing to this, unable to express my opinion. I mean, that's what our job here is to do. I believe our job is to question what we're seeing proposed as policy. Rather, we should be proposing policy, and we should be hearing the concerns and expressing our opinion and listening We shouldn't always have to go and seek clarification. If we're hearing something from a constituent, it's likely because it needs to be addressed. And if it's something that we can do, I don't think they want to hear that, you know what, I need to go back and let me go find an answer for you. I'm not here to tout the company line. I'm here to ensure that we can make changes in the interest of the public. So those are my thoughts just off the top. I've got a few others, but I'll open it up to the debate if anybody wants to chime in.
I know Acting CAO Clark wanted to make a comment.
Yeah, just a bit of clarification here. I think maybe there's a misunderstanding. The definition clearly says members of council means individuals elected, and members of the public means entity residing and or having. Those are two separate definitions, just to be clear on that one. The other concern I have is that we brought this report 3 weeks ago in good faith, asking council to provide feedback and suggestions and recommended edits, comments, suggestions in any way, shape, or form. And to be brought at a council meeting where I didn't hear a peep other than a brief conversation the mayor and I had about a couple of points, and I went through everything that the mayor shared with me. It's very disheartening. I just have to say it's very disheartening.
Point of
a lot of
personal
effort was
privilege.
put. I've been
Sorry.
expressing my opinion.
A point of privilege has been made. What is the point of privilege that you are talking about, Councillor?
This report was deferred at through the chair. This report was deferred at the last council meeting, regardless of whether the points were made at that meeting or not. We're here to debate it again, so I think it's well within our rights to go ahead and make points. It's open for debate until passed. It has not passed.
Very well. Okay. Was there another technicality that you wanted to provide? Okay. I really don't want to be getting into debate with staff, as the debate is to happen amongst council regarding the policy, so I would ask that we stick with council debating with council. Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. You know, one of the things I learned in my business life was that sometimes I make decisions and then sometimes I hear things that make me change my mind, and in a lot of cases the things that made me change my mind end up being a good thing. So listening to Councillor Wilkinson, I tend to now agree that perhaps we should take a longer look at this and maybe go back to it. And I'm not disparaging our staff at all, but I would like to have more clarification as well. There were things that Mr. Wilkinson brought up, as well as Mr. Wolf, that I perhaps didn't notice in reading. So I just want to say that I'm in favor of deferring now and having further conversation. Thank you.
I'm just going to quickly consult with our clerk as to procedurally where this puts us. Okay, sorry, we've just not had to do many reconsideration votes. So, Councillor Dunstall, because you originally were on the opposition of the deferral, you are allowed to bring back a reconsideration. That would mean it would be moved by yourself to defer. You would need to have a seconder, and that can be anyone on either side of the original vote. It then would require 2/3 of council, which I'm being informed is 4. In order to open it back up for conversation on time and place of deferral, then we would have to have a motion on the actual deferral, should all of that fall into place accordingly. I do see that Councillor Cressman would like to make a comment. Because it has not formally been moved, I do just want to allow that opportunity. Councillor Cressman.
Yes, I guess the question is, if my opposition was centered around until we have a permanent CAO, I guess the question is if it was a time and I guess I could debate it under time and place as it relates to a date or so many council meetings. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So Councillor Dunstall, are you putting forward a motion to reconsider
Yes,
the
I am.
deferral? Okay, so
Mayor.
that is moved by Councillor Dunstall. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. So the vote will be on if we are to reconsider the deferral. All those in favor? All those opposed? And that carries. So now we are reconsidering. I just need to clarify. We will take a new mover and seconder for the deferral. So Councillor Dunstall, are you moving a deferral?
Yes, I am, Mayor.
And it's seconded by Councillor sorry, time and place of your deferral, yes.
So we were reconsidering.
Sorry, no, it's reconsidering the previous set. Please bear with us, everybody in the audience. We do not do this often. Okay, so it's seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. So now we have on the floor the original deferral, which we are now reconsidering, and the time and place is that this be brought back when we have a permanent CAO in place. So questions on time and place, which Councillor Cressman, I believe you're next.
Yes, I think the time and place until we have a permanent CAO is too open-ended. I would like to see something more defined, and would look to my colleagues to come up with suggestions, or can I insert a different time and place into this? I'm looking to the clerk.
As am I. You can make an amendment if you have a proposed time or place. Yep. So Councillor Cressman, would you like to make an amendment on a suggested time and place?
Yes, I would make an amendment to the council meeting that's planned for the end of January, whatever date that is, of 2025.
Okay.
I would second that motion.
Okay, so right now this is an amendment on the floor that this comes back at the end of January to our final council meeting in January of 2025. It's been moved, seconded. So now we vote on this amendment. Should the amendment pass, then we vote on the deferral to that new time. Should it fail, then we go back to the deferral time on the table, just so that everybody's clear of where we're going. Okay, so all of those in favor, oh, sorry, Councillor Wilkinson, time and place.
Through the chair, are we allowed to comment on time and place? Okay, so I think in that sense, I mean, given sort of what I'm describing here, I think we go to the end of January. I mean, at that point, if we review and it's still not, then I suppose we could potentially defer again. But the idea is within that time frame, we can try and achieve an agreeable outcome. Is that yes? Okay.
Yep, that is correct. Any other questions on the time and place amendment before us? Seeing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? And that carries. So now the motion is as amended. So now we are going to vote on deferring this to the final January 2025 meeting to come back. I already have a mover and a seconder. I'm going to call the vote on this one. All those in favor? And all those opposed? And that carries. And I hope that going forward, reconsideration votes don't come up very often. That was, some of the cadets were asking me about stress in the job. Sometimes it is stressful going through a process you don't often. Okay. We have now gone through that. That was all of our reports for this evening. On to our bylaws. I certainly hope will be a bit smoother. The bylaws as attached to this agenda to be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed in open council. May I please have a mover? Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Sadhu. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. And we do have two notices of motion this evening. I will allow Councillor Dunstall to introduce her first one, which is regarding a potential installation of a veterans crosswalk. Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. We may not know each of their names, but we owe them all our deepest gratitude. Across Canada, communities like Belleville, Chatham, Calgary, Hamilton, and many more are coming together installing veterans crosswalks to honor the brave individuals who stepped forward with unwavering courage and declared, "You can count on me to protect you, your family, and our country." Here in Wilmot, we honor our veterans each November with beautiful banners featuring the local men and women who served our country. Yet these banners are displayed for only a short time. And just one day, November 11th, is set aside to remember those who gave everything to protect our rights and freedoms. Their sacrifices deserve far more recognition. With a permanent crosswalk, or why a permanent crosswalk? Well, celebrating shared values of bravery and service inspires a stronger sense of patriotism and cohesion. It's a visible tribute we can see daily, acknowledging their sacrifices for freedom and security, and it pays tribute not only to national contributions, but to the profound sacrifices of our local vets. At a recent Veterans Dinner, their stories came alive through a heartfelt presentation. As we looked at the pictures of those young faces, we learned personal information. We learned about how tall they were, what color their eyes were, what color their hair was, how much they weighed, not something I would have shared, and the tender ages at which they enlisted, just 18 to 21. Those photos of local boys and their homes they left behind on Peel Street and nearby roads were especially moving to me. I see those homes when I drive down Peel Street. I recognize them. And I recognize some of those porches, and I could envision those young boys so excited, running up those porch steps, taking two at a time, to tell their parents that they had enlisted. Tragically, most of those young faces we saw never returned home. It's a powerful reminder of the weight of their sacrifice and the lasting impact on our community. The New Hamburg Royal Canadian Legion Branch 532 has offered to cover the cost of the crosswalk. Therefore, be it resolved that staff bring back a report by February 3rd, 2025 on the feasibility, costs, and funding options for installing a permanent Veterans Crosswalk on Huron Street near the New Hamburg Cenotaph by November 2025, including potential collaboration with the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 532. And I would also like to extend my personal heartfelt thanks to Lou DeVita for his assistance in getting this information. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there a seconder for Councillor Cressman is going to second the motion? I did actually myself have a question of clarification. When you're talking about the crossing located at Huron Street, you're talking about the existing crosswalk, correct?
Correct,
And not proposing
correct.
the new one? Okay, thank you. That was all the clarification I had. Are there any questions or comments on the motion, councillors? Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, no questions. I'm really thankful for you bringing this forward. This is a great initiative, and I hope that it's able to pass, and then we can work with our partners at the region to hopefully realize this becoming a...
Councillor Stu.
Yeah, just to echo Councillor Wilkinson's comments there. When I read this, in my mind it was a slam dunk, and kind of jealous I didn't think of it before, but thank you, Councillor Dunstall, for bringing it forward. Absolutely, our veterans, they are the most important people to us, and to have something year-round where we can pay tribute, or just when you see it, you think about it just for that brief moment, and I'm looking forward to this. Thanks.
Councillor Cressman.
Yes, having read this motion and rereading the agenda this morning, I went online to see where others were located, saw the one in Hamilton, one in Stony Creek, proposed one in St. Catharines to be installed by next year. So I think some I've heard has said, well, where will these crosswalks stop if we open the floodgate to this in terms of other agencies wanting their crosswalks? I think this is very much unique. These are people who stepped into the gap, and as Councillor Dunstall indicated, sacrificed immensely, some their lives, others permanent scarring because of what they saw and experienced, and I think it's very apropos.
Any other comments or questions, councillors? Okay, seeing none, I will call the vote. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. And Councillor Dunstall, you have a second motion to bring forward. I will turn it over to you. Just to note the process, we do have one registered delegation, so we will get the motion on the floor. Councillor Dunstall will speak to it. Our delegate will come up after, and then we can debate if there's any debate after. So, Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. It was always my understanding, and I welcome input from my colleagues here, that the working group was intended to consist exclusively of Wilmot residents. This is not an attempt to silence anyone. Everyone, voices from outside Wilmot, and anyone is welcome to share their perspectives by delegating at our council meetings or submitting correspondence. And to be honest, I cannot imagine residents from any other municipality, let's say Markham, being okay with someone from Wilmot joining their committee to influence decisions affecting their communities and taxpayers. That doesn't make sense. The same logic applies in reverse. While door knocking, I heard a common concern. Residents in our community felt their voices had not been heard. A working group of local volunteers with diverse viewpoints is essential to developing recommendations for Wilmot Council. This ensures those helping shape decisions have a direct stake in the outcomes and genuinely represent our community. Our township has faced significant scrutiny in the past, with media coverage and special interest groups unfairly questioning our character, values, and moral integrity. As a result, our community endured considerable criticism. It is entirely reasonable and just for Wilmot residents to have the opportunity to represent themselves and their interests. Therefore, let it be resolved that Council direct Laura to bring back a term of reference to Council which stipulates that members of the working group must be residents of Township of Wilmot. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there a seconder for this motion? Seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. As I said, we will go into our registered delegation first, and then we will have debate after. And I will invite Barry Wolf back up to delegate to Council on this item. And Barry, you will have 7 minutes.
Through you, Mayor, before we go, a technical question. Is it possible that the camera recording this be focused on Councillor Dunstall and not me? And my words to go, because I'm speaking mostly, I guess, to her, and I would like these words to reflect her as the important point. Is that possible?
I will be honest, I don't know. I'm seeing a thumbs up, I think, if my eyesight's good. Yes, I'm getting a thumbs up from our tech.
Can I check my makeup first, please?
See, I'm just an old, fat, ugly, bald guy, so it's really, okay. I've had my fun. Thank you to Councillor Dunstall for bringing this notice of motion forward. This is another example of Council fulfilling its responsibilities per Section 224 of the OMA. Items 224 D and E of the OMA state that it's the role of Council to ensure that administrative policies, practices and procedures and controllership policies, practices and procedures are in place to implement the decisions of Council and to ensure the accountability and transparency of the operations of the municipality, including the activities of the senior management of the municipality. Don't scowl. These stipulations require councillors to monitor, supervise, direct, and redirect its hired staff throughout the entirety of any project's implementation. At any public meeting, ongoing directions and/or redirections are conveyed transparently, clearly, and specifically to its management staff to ensure that the values, principles, interests, goals, and aspirations of the citizens are executed as related through Council. The specificity of this motion, notice of motion, meets that standard. The actions of the working group are founded in a motion passed by a previous council on July 5, 2021, when it was recognized by the consultant in recommendation B that in Wilmot Township there needs to be a greater openness, accountability, and citizen participation in decision-making. Further, recommendation A states that a process towards practicing that goal was by creating a working group comprised of a balanced representation of the individuals and communities within Wilmot Township, to discuss, develop, and suggest plans for the implementation of next steps centered in community cohesion and healing. Council many months ago requested a report from its senior management for suggested strategies toward implementing that working group. Staff brought back 3 options that all stated maintain the current direction. That is, create a working group that would recommend, because the PMP project had been terminated at that time, how to dispose of the statues. Staff reports were myopic in that they did not recognize a political reality. The direction had been given by voters to the current council to, in effect, restart the entire decision-making process for the PMP project in its entirety. It required significant discussion among council before specific language was finally given to direct staff to specifically implement a process that considered disposal or display of the statues, plus all other alternatives. Well done, Councillors Wilkinson, Dunstall, Sadhu, and Cressman, for that leadership, by recognizing the need to provide essential clarity, transparency, and fullness of direction to the process of decision-making. A senior management report indicated that staff will work with Laura to develop a project charter and plan that will be shared with the public and council as a first step in starting the engagement. This project plan will form the agreement with the community on the timing and scope of the engagement. In other words, management staff would again be defining from the top down over the what, who, how, when, where, and why for the process. At the September 23rd, 24 meeting of Council, in response to a question from Councillor Dunstall regarding the membership composition of the working group, the senior manager stated, and I quote, "Ultimately, the diversity and the value of this working group is based on the people that step forward to participate," and further stated that we're not seeing voices from this community, so that's on me as a project matter to make sure we're getting engagement. I think he misspoke and intended to say, if we're not seeing voices. Both of these top-down assumptions by a senior manager raised integrity of the process questions in my mind. At the public information meeting held on November 12th, I showed up at 4:40 and stayed until 7:55 asking questions and seeking information from anyone there who would talk to me, including regular citizens like myself. To the credit of the consultants, Denise and Benny, the senior manager's intent is reported to council to create a project charter and plan which would have been unilaterally negotiated agreement with the community was bypassed by the consultants. They indicated it would be Lura who would be describing and implementing the consultation process according to their 1,000+ experiences of best practices in facilitating effective group decision-making. It will be Lura, not a staff project manager, that would be ensuring there is engagement and representative voices. We spent some time discussing demographics and the formation of the working group so that it would be a balanced representation of the individual communities within Wilmot Township. I pointed out that one of the many cultural voices that might be heard would be those of the Indigenous background. Benny indicated that Indigenous people tend not to speak for anyone other than themselves. It's not part of the culture to make statements that may be taken as representing a small or large group of others, let alone of a tribe or a nation. It is traditionally chiefs or elders who are recognized with high levels of esteem and respect who are the spokespersons. I asked Benny to clarify the meaning and implications of a role that I had heard he had among his peers, that of crane. He explained that tribal groups recognize, and there are times when communications between tribal groups or others need to be negotiated by a neutral, highly respected member of the culture, other than a chief or elder. That person, a crane, can legitimately move from individual to individual, group to group, gathering, collating, compiling information to be later shared among the groups. I understood his role to be somewhat like a mediator who moves from group to group, eventually bringing consensus to all. In other words, the impression I got from Benny was that it was not absolutely essential that, for example, an Indigenous person be part of the working group. He opined that it would be very difficult to get someone to do that anyway, that he could play that role of bringing Indigenous voices to the working group if needed. I then observed that many of the succession of tribal groups that had lived or passed through the area of southwestern Ontario over the eons had finally been displaced by the invasions of Iroquois from what is now New York State. Those people had been driven out into the Niagara Peninsula and through Detroit into the U.S., north around the lakes through Michilimackinac, and funneled into the confines of Bruce Peninsula. The amalgamated remnants of those cultures had been grouped together on the Saugeen First Nation band lands. They now self-identify as Chippewas of Saugeen Ojibwe Band and are comprised of the Three Fires Confederacy. He concurred with my recollections of history. I then suggested, as a crane, he might consider contacting some members of the Saugeen First Nation to add their perspective to the working group. I suggested the names of a couple of people with whom I had worked while in Southampton to get their perspective, not their participation in the working group. They have official roles now, those people. I suggested Lester Anaquat, who during the 1990s was the education director for the band and who sat as the Indigenous representative on the school board. There are presently several band counselors who back in the day were students of mine. He was receptive to the leads of potential consultation. The point I'm making is based on a personal opinion, conclusion of mine. It is a value judgment regarding trust that I came to after less than an hour of relating with Denise and Benny. I have hopeful expectations. I'm wrapping it up. I'm trying my best. I practice this, you wouldn't believe. I have hopeful expectations that the Lura consultants will act only as facilitators and that the work process and product will be essentially founded in the working group's members, whomever they may be. They will not be limited, directed, or manipulated through imposed process structures. Council will see, I guess, it receives regular reports of the group's work. Denise and Benny said that it is not the council nor the senior management that will be any way directing the process used. Wilmot staff will be held at arm's length and not be...
Barry, I am sorry, I'm going to have to cut you off, but
It'll be the work.
Thank you very much, Barry. Councillors, are there questions for our delegate?
The last paragraph.
Okay. Seeing none, it's okay. I think we all got your messages. Thank you very much, Barry.
My last sentence was to Councillor Dunstall.
Barry.
I send you a virtual hug.
Please.
Appreciation for your initiative.
Okay. Thank you.
Best I can do. I'm sorry.
Any questions for our delegate councillors? Seeing none. Do we have we already have our seconder, sorry. Any questions, comments on the motion before us? Councillor Martin?
Through you, Mayor Salonen, I think that it's important to have people from Wilmot Township. I also think that if we say that they can only be from Wilmot Township, it could restrict us in having the best people in the working group. And so I would vote against this because I think it is limiting.
Okay. Councillor Dunstall?
I would disagree with that because we're making the assumption that the best people would, or perhaps the best people could be people from outside of Wilmot, and I believe that it is the people of Wilmot that would be the best to decide what should happen in their community.
Councillor Stu?
Thank you. I will be supporting Councillor Dunstall's motion since the Prime Minister's path is an issue in our residents' backyard. It impacts our residents in a significant way. There will be 5 more public engagement sessions where any member of the public, regardless of your postal code, can come and attend and share their opinions or views. And the next one is going to be actually on December 12th for the first community tea circle. As a part of council who will be receiving the working group's reports to inform future decisions made by council, I feel it is important to have a working group that would be comprised of our residents. Like I said, having said that, there are general delegations available where people can come and express your views, but I do firmly believe that the working group that will be advising us or giving us a recommendation should be residents that are residing in Wilmot and it is in their backyard.
Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, I mean, just everything's basically been said, but I concur. I mean, we are a body that represents the interests of Wilmot Township, and we're put here by the citizens of Wilmot Township. This is a project that has been controversial for Wilmot Township, so I agree Wilmot Township needs to make the decision. So I'm glad to see this come forward.
Councillor Cressman to finish off everyone making
I certainly, it was certainly my impression as we walked down this path that this would be the case, that the working group would be Wilmot Township residents. I think our tent has been spread wide enough that we can get input from others. We can be informed by the process that Barry talked about, by, you know, the Indigenous term as a mediator. Grain, sorry. My mind used to be better, Barry. And I think that is the way to receive the information. I read some of the letters to council that said I was a resident of Baden, but now I'm living in Kitchener. I'll be sorry I can't be on the working committee. Well, you have the opportunity of making your voice heard, just like others outside, and so I don't see that as a restrictive. But I think if we want our residents to embrace whatever the final decision is, I think we have to bring the township residents along with us in the decision-making process, and that is, it's important that the working group be residents of the township, and that we know it's a strongly, it's divided the community in a way, but if this is done properly, we have a way that hopefully we have a process that ensures that we can bridge the gulf between two different perspectives, and regardless of the outcome, we can hopefully heal some wounds and move forward.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Martin?
Through you, Mayor Salonen, just to clarify, Councillor Dunstall had said that, or thought that I had implied the best people would be outside of the township, and if that is what was heard from what I said, that's not my intent. I'm not trying to say the best people are outside of the township. I just think that when we only allow people from the township, we're not recognizing that part of the, this Prime Minister's path is about our country, and it's a controversial topic, recognizing the history in terms of other communities deciding not to have the path. And so it involves more than our township, and that's really why I think we shouldn't limit it to that.
Thank you, Councillor. I just wanted to make a few comments myself. I also was of the same understanding, to be honest, that, and I guess I just didn't ask, but I made the assumption that the working group itself was going to be Wilmot folks only. So, Councillor, I do appreciate you bringing this forward. I do, however, want to be very clear that I am very, very pleased and excited about the work that our consulting firm, Laura, has already done, along with our internal staff team. I know that you guys are adding this on to an extensive workload, and I think really making great steps towards remediating problems and concerns that residents did have when this issue was first addressed. And I do want to make note, because they are partway through the recruitment process, and my understanding is that council does just have to, and I mean, I know that council already owns it, I just want to publicly say council does have to own making a pivot partway through a process if this is to be successful. Again, I will be voting in favor, because I just made the assumption that that's how it was going to always be, but also with that taking the full onus that we are partway through the recruitment process, and that may have an impact on the project as it proceeds. Again, I think a positive one, but also noting that now staff may, depending on how the vote goes, have to adjust accordingly. The other thing that I do just also want to note is the process itself of actually selecting. I don't know how many of you know, but I did want to make note, especially for residents who may not have been able to make it out to the engagement session. But those who applied, there were a variety of questions that they had to answer, and then we had two staff that essentially redacted any personal identifying information, and then that's being provided to the consultants to then be selecting. So from that perspective, I'm personally very pleased in the process, in that they're going off of merit of people both explaining why they want to be on the group, what they bring to the group, and also one thing that they were looking at and that our consultants were really clear on that they want is the individual's perspective on the issue, to ensure that we're getting broad range of views and ideas. So I did just, again, me voting in favor of this, I do want to really note that the process that we are doing, I'm very pleased with. I just agree that ensuring the actual people sitting on the engagement group are Wilmot residents. And again, to reiterate what's already been mentioned, but there are lots of great opportunities for voices far and wide beyond just Wilmot to engage in this process. And I do really hope that we get engagement from them. And I know that our consultants are also working to ensure that different voices are being heard and people who are more experienced in this realm of dealing with great questions and issues like this. Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Just one more thing I wanted to add, that the extension, there has been an extension made for people to apply. You can apply to be part of the group up until tomorrow, the 26th at 11:59 p.m. So if you have not put forward your application and are interested, go to the Township website, and the link is there for you to go and apply. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments, councillors? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? And that carries. Now, please do bear with me. We have quite a few announcements this evening. First and foremost, today is the International Day for Elimination of Violence Against Women. Nearly 1 in 3 women globally experience violence in their lifetime. In Canada, a woman is killed by her intimate partner every 6 days. Women's Crisis Services of Waterloo Region empowers and supports women and children to move beyond violence by providing safe shelter, education, prevention, and outreach services. Programs and services can be accessed both by calling the Women's Crisis Center Services, which is 24/7 support line at 519-653-2422 or 519-742-5894 or online for chats. December 3rd is the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. This is an opportunity for everyone, including municipalities, to recommit to building a future free of barriers where people with disabilities have every opportunity to thrive. December 6th is the National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women. On this day, we remember the 14 young women at the Polytechnique Montreal who were murdered in a violent act of misogyny. On December 6th, Canadians remember all those who have experienced gender-based violence and the many women who have lost to it. All Canadians are encouraged to observe this in a moment of silence at 11 a.m. on December the 6th. Also a reminder that there is an ongoing Canada Post strike which continues to impact all incoming and outgoing mail delivery. Payment due dates for property taxes, water bills, and parking tickets will not be changed. Residents are responsible for keeping payments up to date. You can sign up for e-billing to prevent delayed invoices and payments. Payments can also be made via your banking institution, online banking, telephone banking, pre-authorized payment plans, and in person at our administration complex, which is attached to the castle in Baden. And also you can drop off in our drop box located at the castle location, checks in our drop box. And only checks, please no cash if you are doing that avenue, and it can be delivered in a sealed envelope addressed to the appropriate department. We've already briefly touched on it, but nearly 100 people attended our first community gathering for the Prime Minister's Path Engagement Project. So thank you to everyone who took the time to come out. Again, a huge thank you to our staff who were involved in putting on that event. I think it was really well received by the community and a great first public part of this process that we're continuing to endeavor down. And if you want to find out about any more of the engagement opportunities or dates that were mentioned tonight or that are proceeding later on, please do visit the engagewaterlooregion.ca/Prime Minister's Path to subscribe to the project for updates. The next public meeting will be a community tea circle, as Councillor Sadhu mentioned, on December the 12th. And again, there will be another community tea circle on January 13th regarding the Prime Minister's Path. Thank you to our Waterloo Regional Police Services for partnering with Council to offer a community conversation on November the 18th. Many community members were grateful that WRPS took the time to share their expertise and insights on how we can better protect our communities, our properties, vehicles, and neighbours. And so a special thank you to our councillors who helped facilitate that and push for that to happen, as well as Councillor Cressman. I know you had a particular focused one in New Dundee earlier this month as well, so thank you for bringing those opportunities forward. The Baden Santa Claus Parade is taking place at noon on Saturday, November the 30th. The parade will start on Gingrich Road and Foundry Street, and it'll go along Foundry to Livingston Boulevard and finish at Wagler and Livingston. Folks are encouraged to bring non-perishable food items in support of the Wilmot Family Resource Center. Children are also encouraged to bring their letters to Santa. The Wilmot Fire Department is hosting a toy drive this season. Firefighters will collect new unwrapped toys along the parade route at the New Hamburg Santa Claus Parade, which is happening on Sunday, December the 1st, and the Firebirds game at the the Wilmot Rec Center on Friday, December the 13th. On that note, the New Hamburg Santa Claus Parade is happening this Sunday, December the 1st, and the Township of Wilmot is proud to support the New Hamburg Firebirds Teddy Bear Toss at the game on December the 6th at our rec complex. Please bring teddy bears, mitts, hats, scarves to Wilmot Rec Complex Center and get your free game ticket at the Wilmot Rec Complex, the Administration Complex, and the New Hamburg, New Dundee, or Baden libraries. Or myself, I have a very large stack of them. And I believe our counselors do as well. So please, if you happen to see any of us, you can grab that or go to any of the identified locations. And my last one, I promise, Community Care Concepts is having their annual Christmas benefit breakfast, which is taking place on Saturday, December 14th from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. at the New Hamburg Legion. Tickets are available at the door or in advance by calling the Legion. Counselors, do any of you have announcements that I missed? No? Seeing none, may I have a mover and a seconder for our confirmatory bylaw? Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Dunstall. All those in favour? That carries unanimously. And adjournment. May I have a mover? Councillor Dunstall, seconded by Councillor Cressman. All those in favour? That carries unanimously. And have a good evening.